Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Oluwaseun and we're going to continue in our Jenkins series today. Now, in the last video, we looked at how to deploy from Jenkins to our EC2 instance. Now, in today's video, we want to look at, number one, how do we connect to a private repository? Now, in the last video, the repository that we used was actually a public repo, which means anybody can clone it, anybody can connect to it, right? You don't need any kind of authentication to connect to that repository because it's a public repo. Now, we want to look at a private repo because in a work environment, your repository obviously will not be public. It's going to be a private repository. And of course, with a private repository, you can authenticate with HTTPS or you can also authenticate with SSH. Now, in our own case, we're going to be authenticating with SSH. But the question is, how will Jenkins connect to a private repository? That's what we want to look at today. Now, in addition to that, we also want to look at the concept of webhook. Webhook in the sense that if I commit into my repository, then Jenkins build should be triggered automatically. Okay, so that's the build trigger that we want to look at. So today we want to look at two things. The first one is how Jenkins will connect to a private repo. The second one is how to configure the build trigger so that anytime I commit into my repository, then the job will be built automatically without, me starting up the build manually. Is that okay? So those are the two things that we want to look at in today's video. So let's get started. Now I'm going to come here. I'm going to say new item. All right. But before I come here to say new item, let's take a look at our repository. So here is the repository that we're going to be using. And if you look at it, it says the repository is what? Is private. So that means if I click on this repository, it means that this repository, if you want to clone this repository, you may need, it says use password protected SSH key. Okay. So you may need my SSH credentials in order to clone this particular repository. Is that okay? So this repository is private. Now, when you want to connect to your repository on GitHub, how do you connect? Ask yourself that question. If you're able to figure out how you connect, then you can figure out also how Jenkins is going to connect also. Now, how do you connect to a repository? You have what you call an SSH key. There's the private key and there's the public key, right? Now, if I come here to my system, so here I can say ls, the home, all right, the tilde sign which represent the home directory, /.ssh. Now, this location is where my SSH key is stored by default. Now, if I press enter, I have quite a number of keys here. Okay, so there's the GitHub, there's the public one. Now, any one of these keys that ends with .pub is the public key. Pub, rather, is the one that you have on the GitHub, all right, settings. So the settings page of the GitHub, if you go there, for example, if I click on settings, right now, this is the repository settings, okay? But the settings that we need to get to is the system settings, all right, itself. So I'm going to click outside again, just click on the repository name right here, all right, and then, all right, so if you click on settings, now this right here will take you, all right, to the repository settings, okay, because there are two settings. So there's the general settings, which is for the old GitHub, and then you have settings for individual repository. All right, so if I click here to basically take me outside of this repo, all right, now right here I can come here, click here, and then I can come here to settings. Okay, so if I come here and I click on settings, let's take a look at that. So if I click on settings, if I scroll down, I will see where I have SSH and GPG keys. So if I click on that, it basically shows me the two keys that I have. So the key that you see here is actually the public one. Okay, so this public key is what you see right here, is the one that I copied here. Is that okay? Now the private key is on my own on my own system. So this is a private key right here. So this private key is what I'm using to authenticate with my GitHub account. Okay, so that means it's going to look at a private key that I am supplying and then look at the public key. If there's a match, right, then I'm able to authenticate. Is that okay? So that is exactly what we're also going to do. Now, we also need this key to be made available on Jenkins because you want Jenkins to interact with your GitHub, particularly a repository that is private. So that means you need an authentication, all right, method to do that. Is that okay? So this particular private key, we need to make it available on our Jenkins machine, okay? So that Jenkins can connect to, all right, the private repository. Is that okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say cat the home directory /.ssh/ then the name of the key that I want to make available for Jenkins, right? So that's going to be this. Now, this is the private key, and that is what we need because the public key is already available on GitHub, right? So I'm going to press enter, and then I'm going to come here, copy all of these, all right? No white spaces, copy that. And then I'm going to go back to my Jenkins server, and then I'm going to click on manage Jenkins. All right, so I'm going to click on manage Jenkins, and then I'm going to come here to credentials. Okay. Now click on system. All right, click on global credentials, and I'm going to add a new credential. Okay, so click on add credentials. The kind is going to be SSH username with private key. That's going to be, all right, a kind of credentials. Now the ID can be, okay, it can be GitHub. All right, key, I mean, just a simple name. The description can be SSH key, all right, for GitHub, all right? So it's telling us unacceptable character. So let's just bring them together, right? GitHub key. Okay, now the username here is going to simply be what? Git, that's the username. Because if you look at the repository itself, all right, let's go back to the repo. If you look at the repository, so think Jenkins, what's the name of the repo? All right. So let me go back to dashboard, and then let's go to repository here. So I'm just going to click on any of this repository. I'm going to click on my name here. All right. Then I'll click on repository again. And then this is what we're looking for. So I'm going to click here. All right. And so if you come here, you will see that the SSH starts with Git, right? So Git at github.com. So from Jenkins, the username is going to be what? Git. That's going to be the username. Is that okay? Don't confuse yourself. All right. So if you look at what you have is Git at, so the Git here is representing what? The username. Is that okay? So that's exactly what we're going to put here. So the username is Git. The private key, you enter that directly, and then you click on add, and then you paste the key here like this. All right, and then we save or we create that. So now we have the key created. Okay, so now we can actually come back here and say new item. All right, and then we can call this private repo. Okay, and then we choose pipeline, and then we say okay. All right, now here we are going to select a few options. Okay. Now, right here, I want to come here and say GitHub hook trigger for SCM Polling, which means this particular pipeline can be triggered, all right, if there's a push event in my GitHub repository, which means if somebody, pushes into that repository, then this pipeline should be triggered automatically. Is that okay? All right, so let's select that. Now here, I'm not going to paste in the script this time around. I'm basically just going to say the pipeline script is from SCM, which means the pipeline script that I want to use is available inside, all right, of my GitHub repository. So you can fetch it from there. So I'm going to select that. And of course, it's going to ask us which SCM. Of course, it's Git. So we're going to select Git. And then here, it expects us to put in the URL of the repository. So now, since I have my SSH key on Jenkins, I'm going to go with this, all right, SSH URL. Okay. And then I'll paste that here. And then I'll come here to select the credentials. Of course, it's going to give me an error, or it can't connect, permission denied, public key and all of that. But I'm going to select the key that I have right here. So if I select that, all right, let's see what happens. Now, I'm able to connect directly, okay, with this particular repository. It didn't show me any kind of error and all of that. But now, here is the catch. If you're setting up your Jenkins server for the very first time, and then you're using a private repository with the, the private key. Now, usually there's what you call the known host. I mean, we saw that, okay, in the last video where we used the strict host key checking equals to no. Basically, we said we don't want, Jenkins to ask us questions. We don't want the pipeline to be interactive and all of that. Now, by default, this is also going to give us that issue. Now, the fact that I'm not seeing an error here does not mean that everything is fine. Is that okay? Because now it is also going to attempt to do what you call the host key checking, right? And so in order for me to be able to prevent that, so that, that will not hinder my pipeline from running and all of that, I need to do one more thing, okay? And that is going to, all right, here, I'm going to go back to Manage Jenkins, all right? And then I'm going to come here to Security. So I'm going to click on Security right here, all right? And then I'll scroll all the way down. And then here, I have what we call Git host key verification configuration. And right here, I'm going to change these to accept first connection so that it doesn't ask me, oh, are you sure you want to, do you want to verify, blah, blah, blah. We don't want all of that, host key checking thing. Is that okay? So I'm going to say accept first connection, and then I'm going to save. So that way, it's not going to give me any kind of error as it relates to the known, all right, the host key verification, all right? And then I'm going to come back here. And right now I need to specify the branch. So which branch, do I want to use? Is it master, or what's the name of the branch that, the branch will contain your Jenkins file? Is that okay? So I'm going to come back here, and the branch name is deploy to EC2. That's the name of the branch, right? So I'm going to come here and say deploy to EC2, right? So that's the name of the branch, right? And then right here, I'm going to say save, okay? So I'm saving all of these, and of course, nothing has been triggered yet. Now, the next thing I want to do is that since I have configured that the Jenkins pipeline can be triggered, all right, by my Git, okay, push event and all of that, then that means I need to come here to my repository, all right, and then I'll click on settings from here, okay, and that is the repository settings now, not the, the platform settings, the repository settings. And then I'm going to come here to webhooks. I'm going to click on webhooks. Now you can see that I have one webhook configured before, which is no longer available now. So I'm going to click on edit. All right. So it's asking me to authenticate. Let me see if, all right, my GitHub, let me see if the mobile is working here. Okay. I need to verify that. Just 1 minute, guys. Okay. So I'm going to open up my Git application on my phone if that is accessible. All right. So it's not accessible. I'm going to just say use password, and I'm going to put in my password right here. All right. So there you go. The password has been entered. Now I'll come here, and this is the IP address of my server, right? The Jenkins server. Okay. Or you can also come here, connect to these, and then grab it from here. And you can actually come right here, and then you can put it like this. So just change the IP address. So the IP address column 8080 then / GitHub webhook. The content type is going to be application/JSON. We're not using any kind of SSL because, our Jenkins server is not secured, so we can say disable. Not recommended though, but at least for what we want to do, we can disable that. And then it says, which event would you like to trigger this webhook? So just push event. So it means anytime somebody pushes or commits anything into the repository, then the build, okay, or the Jenkins pipeline should be triggered. So I'm going to say update webhook. All right. And in order to verify that I'm able to connect to my Jenkins server, right, there's kind of synchronization, I can click on webhooks right here. Okay. And then I can come back to edit. I can come here to recent deliveries. Okay. And I can click here to retry, any of these delivery. Okay. I'm going to say redeliver. All right, so I'm going to say yes. So if everything is fine between Jenkins and my Git, I should see this green check mark. So the green check mark basically means that, Git was able to connect to, all right, my Jenkins, server. Okay, that's the pop. So I've tested that, and everything is working very fine. And right here it says what? The last delivery was successful. So Jenkins and GitHub, particularly this repository now, has some kind of connection. Is that okay? Now here, I can come back here now and, let's go to EC2. Let's set up a new server, right, that we want to deploy to. Okay? And here, I'm just going to call it this, web server. All right, I'm going to call it Ubuntu. Okay, and it's going to be T2 micro, actually. So here, we're going to select this key. We're going to edit that, and this is going to be 3 tier, and this is going to be public. All right, this will be enabled. Okay, all of these already. Okay, so default, I'm going to change this to GP2, and I'm going to launch the instance. Okay, So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this instance and grab the public IP address of this instance. Okay. Now, okay, so this is the server right here. So copy this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here to my repo. I'm going to click on the code. All right. And then I'm going to edit my Jenkins file. Okay. So let's click on that. And I'm going to edit this file right here. I mean, we can do it also from the GitHub page. Okay. And we're going to change the IP address of the server. Okay. So that we're deploying to the correct server. Is that okay? Okay. So this seems to be taking some time. All right. So it seems like it's coming up now. Okay. So there you go. So let's come here. And then I'm going to put the new IP address. Now, if I commit this, automatically, it should trigger, all right, this particular repository. All right, look at that. So I didn't do anything, but what did I press? Did I press build now? Is that what I did? So I can cancel that, okay? So let me cancel that. Maybe I clicked on build now. I really didn't know what happened. Okay. So now I've not committed the changes, okay, but I've changed the IP address. So what I can do really is to, be sure that my server is ready, all right, and it's up and running. Now I can come right here, all right, you can see that I canceled that already, so I aborted it. So let's go back to the GitHub repo and let's commit the changes, all right, and I'm going to say commit changes. So that's more like pushing into the repository. Now, if everything is fine here, we should see some activity right here. Okay, so let's wait and let's see if the pipeline is going to be triggered, okay, automatically by itself. So let's wait for that to happen. Okay, so let's see what we have. All right. Okay, so it was updated just now. And normally this should be triggered automatically because that is what we specify. So if I click on Git hook, all right, okay there. So that is, can you see that? Can you see that? So the pipeline was what? Was triggered automatically. Okay, can you see that now? So I didn't trigger it. I just click on this to check if there's something. So you can see here, it says successful. Is that okay? All right, now look at what you have here. Can you see? It says started by event from. Okay, that's the GitHub URL, all right, and then HTTP on blah, 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 and all of that. Can you see that now? So if I click on this, it tells you that the trigger actually worked. So the moment you push into your repository, your job is built automatically. Is that okay? And you can see here it says started event from. So the event was not started by the user. It was triggered by what? By a webhook. And that is the URL that you can see. So you can see the IP address of the GitHub, the GitHub URL that started the build. And then the trigger was actually for this particular Jenkins server. And then everything happened. So now if I click on this job, okay, and I click on the console output, all right, I can see, let's take a look at the console output. Okay, so you can see it says started by GitHub push by this person. Okay, the previous one we did, we saw that it was started by the user, my username, right? But this one says what? Started by GitHub push, and then the name of the person who made that commit. Okay, and it says obtained Jenkins file from this particular repository. Okay, and then the whole thing started, connected to my server, and the job was actually deployed. Okay, so that means I didn't have to trigger the build. It happened automatically. Is that okay? I didn't have to do that. I didn't have to trigger it. It happened automatically. So that's the purpose of webhook. And then, of course, we've seen also the importance of, using the private repository. So with the private repository, once you have your SSH key configured on your Jenkins server, Jenkins is able to leverage that key and then connect your repo and do your job all right for you. Okay. Now, another thing that I want to show us here lastly is that now, if you look at the interface that we have here, we can see the pipeline stages. Okay. Of course, if I click on stages here, I can see some kind of, the pipeline stage, right? The starts, the deploy, and all of that. I can see that. Okay. But I really don't have to come here to see it. Right here on this page, I should be able to see the pipeline view. Okay, so now in the recent version of Jenkins, that's actually more like something that's not available. So you have to install a plugin that will allow you to see the pipeline view, all right, on your dashboard like this without clicking on the stages that you have here. So we can go back to Manage Jenkins and go to Plugins, and then we can install a plugin for that actually. So I'm going to click on Available Plugin, and I'm going to look for Pipeline, all right, Stage View. So there you go. So this is the plugin, Pipeline Stage View. So I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to install that. Okay, so that plugin will allow us to visualize, the pipeline without going to the stages section. So if I refresh this now, I should be able to see, the stages right here. So can you see that? So now I'm able to see the stages. So I don't have to click here, to see all of the stages. Okay, so I'm able to see the stages right here. Okay, so thank you so much. I believe you've learned something. I mean, you've learned, how to integrate a private repository with your Jenkins server, how to configure the GitHub trigger, and then of course how to install the pipeline stage plugin so that you can visualize everything, all right, on this, on the job page itself without going to the stages section and all of that. So thank you so much. I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.